Hi, and welcome to Out the Box Talk, the only talk show where we talk to people who live life out of the box. And today we have yet another interesting personality. He is a nomadic explorer. He has been exploring different parts of the globe and, of course, different facets of the mind. We're talking about Kevin Cottam.
I'm great. I'm actually much better now that I'm speaking to you, Havish.
Nice to hear that, Kevin. And Kevin, so I want to start off with a general question that I usually ask a lot of people is like, Kevin, how it has been for you? More so, I fairly know about your professional side of things. We'll get to that. But before that, I want to know how was it from your early childhood, your growing up days, to schooling, to your professional side? And can you quickly take us through your journey of how it has been?
Sure. I mean, my quest has been actually very diverse, actually, in my life. And I first started off as a figure skater, so I started in sport and as a competitor, and I was a Canadian champion. And at some point along the way, I became very interested in dance. And during my university, when I was studying science, I decided that I wanted to dance. And so I continued to dance, and I studied in New York City, and then I went to Paris to dance, and I was dancing at the Moulin Rouge, the famous Moulin Rouge, and did can twice a night. And then I came back to Canada, and I started to work as an elite choreographer for National World Olympic Champions, and that's kind of when a lot of my creativity started to boom and excel. And I say that simply because my journey, like many people's journey, they're all unique, first of all. However, I moved a lot from starting in Melbourne. I'm from Canada. I went to Melbourne to start figure skating, teaching there. And then I came back to Canada. Then I moved to New York, and then I moved to Paris. But after that, I moved back to Canada, and I lived in a variety of different cities across Canada, the major cities: Ottawa, Toronto, Calgary, Edmonton, Vancouver, all of them shifting. And I stayed, first started staying about a year, and then I started to stay 3 years, maybe 4 years, and then Vancouver was 9 years. But along the way, when I would do this, people would say to me, "Why are you moving around so much? Why don't you just stay put? You're very successful at what you do. You've become a elite choreographer. You've also choreographed and directed the closing ceremonies of the Olympic Games in Calgary, and you do big productions, multi-million-dollar productions. But why do you keep moving? Why don't you just stay put? Why, are you running away from something?" And I kept on thinking, there's something wrong with me. This is really weird. And people kept on getting annoyed and upset with me. And however, there was a voice inside of me that always said, it's time to move on. And I would listen to this voice. It was a very deep voice inside of me. And so at some point, what happened was I ended up living in London and Paris and Barcelona and a variety of cities, and on through 4 continents. And then I found coaching. And coaching was so exciting, working with executives. And people would say, "Well, how do you know anything about executives? You never worked in an organization at all, and you have only worked in elite sport." And I said, "I don't know. I would say, they're not hiring me for that. They're hiring me for something that's out of the box, something that comes from a different angle, something that is a different perspective." And so I went along with all of that until, and so I became a speaker as well, and as a trainer. And I moved from Canada back to then I moved to Singapore, and that's where I am now. But about 4 years ago, actually 3.5 years ago now, I began to lose a sort of purpose. Why was I doing this moving around? What was the purpose of it? I want a greater, bigger perspective and idea for me to move into the last part of my life. And something inside of me was saying, you got to move on from the old. And I didn't know what it was. And then all of a sudden it became clear that one day I arrived in Canada on November 28th from Singapore, and it was so cold outside, it was snowy. And I went, "Why are you here? what is this? You're a global nomad. You don't have to be here. And all of a sudden, a twig started to happen, a seed of information. And that seed of information turned into what is a nomad. And that is what led me into the research that I have done and continue to do, called the Nomadic Mindset. And that Nomadic Mindset, I have interviewed a variety of executives. And also I have interviewed and spent time with Mongolians, nomads, and also the Maasai in Kenya, the Berbers in the Sahara, and then recently, before COVID, in Namibia with the Bushmen of Kalahari and the Himba. Amazing thinking and amazing. I just was blown away by all of this information and how we've kind of lost the plot. But I come back to something inside of me said, move on. When I was sitting in a yurt, I asked my guest, so why do you migrate? And he said, well, our animals tell us to migrate, first of all, because of seasonal change and because we're going to freeze out here, my animals won't survive. And so we look for a different location. It's mainly for survival and for us to have a better life. And all of a sudden, I connected the dots back. I wasn't running away from anything. I was actually running towards. I was running towards exploration, to expansion, to emergence, to experience, to evolution. That's what I've been moving towards this whole part of my whole life, really. And I found this really interesting. But also what I think is fascinating about it is that since I've started to talk about the nomadic mindset, a person today, in fact, said, thank you so much for sharing all about the nomadic mindset, because he said, I've been feeling so guilty all of my life that I had that same feeling of moving and changing and doing other things. And he said, now I realize that it's not wrong. And isn't it amazing how we put people into different mindsets and into buckets, and we don't let them go out of the box? The nomadic mindset is helping you to go outside of your box. It allows you that creativity. It allows you all those pathways. You know, whether I was doing figure skating for world champions and huge productions, successful productions, that was all about digging in to not thinking the same as everyone else. And also one of the things was when I would do shows, they would say, well, we need to have this in the show, we need to have this in the show, we need to have this in the show. And I said, well, why do you need to have that? Because our audience knows that. And I said, but when I approach the show as if, what doesn't the audience know? What is that something else that we can give them? Include a little bit, but it's about finding what don't they know. Because if you don't know, then you might find something that you do know within that. And that's the thing, is that's what creativity is. And you know, I love that your show is called Out of the Box, because that's what people have said about my coaching too, that I'm an out of the box coach.
Nice. It's a very wonderful journey that you've had. So it brings me to this very fundamental question, you know, for somebody to be really creative, you know, sometimes a lot of it starts early in the beginning, or it's kind of as you grow up, you kind of rebel it out and then you rewrite. So how was it for you, you know, where you, as a young kid at home, were you made to follow the typical protocols and the conditioning, you know, where it's so like the family says, you know what, this is our family, this is how our family behaves, and this is our society, and we need to stick to these norms. And probably this kind of writing happens for you at school, where the school says, you know, this is the uniform, this is the pattern that you follow. And then were you conditioned like that, or it was more like you were made to feel like you were okay, we've got fortunate, we're good, you go ahead and do anything that you want? What was it like for you?
Thanks very much, Arish, for that question, because I think that it's really powerful in that when I look back, first of all, my father, he loved to joke, he loved to sing, he loved to tell stories. He was an incredible storyteller. And wherever we could, he would tell stories, and he would party, and he'd be the life of the party. And my mother was a designer. She was a tailoress, but she was a designer of clothing. And she was always designing. She could see something in a pin, and she would make something out of it. She could see something out of a small piece of fabric, and she would figure out, what can I do with that? And the whole time, I guess I must have learned that. And as a skater, my coaches saw the creativity in me and the ability to dance and to move, and that I wanted something different. And they used to always give me different music, different ways of moving in those days, which was very atypical. So I was kind of out of the box in that sense. And but I loved creativity. I actually was very bad at English. And even though I've written a couple of books, and that's something that I thought I could never do, because I often failed very poorly in English. And often what would happen is that I would have to read a book and I'd have to write a paper on it. But of course I realized that you need to write the paper with what the teacher has in mind. But I never really followed those instructions. I never could follow instructions well. And I would write it the way I thought the impression was. And then it wouldn't sit very well. But the point here is that you need to allow yourself to do that. And my family allowed me to be as creative as I could be. They didn't put harnesses on me to say, no, you cannot do this. You know, I was in the choir. I did a variety of things which were artistic. And of course, as I had told you, this is that I went to school and I thought that I should be going into medicine, which was completely opposite. And I realized very quickly that I couldn't stand the thought of medicine. And I went into dance instead.
Wonderful. I think so. I could see where all the spark comes from. You know, it's the early exposure and the kind of freedom that's given to your minds that you say, okay, you know, there is a possibility out of everything that kind of sparks that little thread in you and probably takes you. So it also brings me to that whole fact. So what do you believe? Do you believe that creativity is all inspired, or it's all a resultant, is an original piece of work? How do you see this whole debate about inspired stuff and the originality stuff?
I think there's a variety of levels in that, and I believe that inspiration of anything external to you as well as internal to you that you hold on to, such as books, such as art, such as, you know, even a twig. I mean, recently I have been traveling around Singapore in parks, and I've been taking photos of bark. Why bark? I have no idea. I just thought all of a sudden bark became beautiful to me, and it was like a skin, and all different colors of skin and different shapes of skin. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it, but it allowed me to be creative. But I guess what I'm saying here is that it can be inspired by external, it can be inspired by internal, and it has to be allowed. When it is not allowed and told it's wrong, 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 you have a problem, you then psychologically and mindset-wise. But I believe within any creator, if you put them down, they're going to come up, because you cannot harness or you can't put down. So, for example, a creative person, if that's in them, that's the will, and they're going to do whatever they can to let it out of themselves, because it's a voice, and that voice is so vital. Even if our families say, no, you have to be an accountant, you have to be a lawyer, you have to be a dentist. You know, I've met many people that have been in that fray, and they have done it, but they now have an incredible art background as well, and they've created beautiful pieces of art and sculpture and dance and all sorts of things. Even when I'm coaching, for example, I ask people, what are the arts that you love? What are the sports that you love? What are the things that you really enjoy? Because people in, you know, managerial director roles or leadership roles, they forget about this. But once you start bringing it into them, all of a sudden a light starts. A light, it's like a permission. I can use this. I can use this love, this passion in the work that I do. It's about transference. So in other words, yes, the inspiration comes from outside, inside, but you can transfer it between different roles, professions, and skills. We have a hard time as individuals seeing that we can transfer. For example, people would say, as a choreographer, as a figure skating choreographer, why are you doing synchronized swimming when you know nothing about synchronized swimming? Why are you doing rhythmic gymnastics when you know nothing about rhythmic gymnastics? And I would say to them, I don't need to know the technique. The people know, the technicians, but I'm there with a concrete base of information that they need. And I'm just able to help and work with them, collaborate with them so that we can create these dances, these movements, these performances. And that's the same in many parts of life, allowing that creativity which is in you to just flow. Do not put a wall or a box around it.
Wonderful, wonderful. I think I completely agree. I can't say anything more. It's about allowing that spirit to come out. It's quite often like I also remember, like, when I do my outbound workshops with corporates, and where like I kind of push them to do like either a film, or I make like a bunch of people to do a piece of artwork. You would suddenly see that the top bosses of companies who are like been known to be extremely rigid and strict, suddenly at some point of time where they break that little threshold, they just go crazy and berserk, and the whole company is like, did he do that right now? I said, yes, he did that, and it happens at that point when they break that little mold and threshold. So that brings me to this question, is like, how much do you see this, allowing you, do you feel it is our own initiative that we need to take that initiative to break and come out, or do we really rely upon external forces or stimulus to kind of trigger that creativity in us?
Harish, I think it's both ways, in many ways, depending on the person themselves. There may be somebody that is very meek and mild and internal and introvert, and they need to have an outside source to say, it's okay, it's all right. So you take small steps forward. Or you have or you live in a community of potters and designers and all sorts of things, and your natural habit is to see everything around you and it's normal. And you just do it. And if you don't like it, you don't do it, you do something else. But the point here is that I think that it comes from both internal and external. It starts from the internal. I think most things start from the internal. But we also remember that as we walk around in the world, everything is put in front of us for a reason. And sometimes we'll open up and click, oh, why is that sign saying that? So what is it telling me? But you have to stop for a moment and have that awareness. It's the same for any sort of creativity. If you think, why am I always drawn towards art, colors, or things? And I'm an accountant, so why? And so the question is, how can I explore that other side of me? And that other side. Some people are afraid because of their livelihood. They think arts, you don't make any money. Well, it's true, a lot of the time you don't. But the point here is that if you don't allow that release, whatever you're doing is going to be very much tightened, and it won't be as free, and you won't be as happy, and your spirit won't come alive as well as it might have if you allowed it to.
I think very well put, Kevin. I think it's about, I so relate to that because I often hear from a lot of other friends of mine who are there in serious corporate and banking and other things. They say, hey, I wish I could go out and do that. I just love. So I always used to tell them, it's about taking that little plunge out, like we were all together in, say, school, college, and then later in part of life where one decided to take a plunge this side vis-a-vis the plunge other side. But I'm particularly stuck to one point that you mentioned, where when you do your stuff, you said you want to figure out what is that people are drawn to. Do they have any hobbies, or do they play a sport or something that you mentioned? So do you think play as a ritual in our lives, as we grow, we forget? Do you feel play is very critical for us to be creative? How is play important for us to be creative?
Well, just imagine when we were young, we were allowed to play. I find it quite horrible, actually, when I see a lot of young people around here in Singapore, in many ways, that they're not allowed to play. Or the parents have them start studying very early, like at 3 and 4 years old, and they're not really playing. Play is the source of the inspiration and, I think, of the soul coming alive. And play is also a way of internal aspects of us learning and growing responsibility and understanding things. Rather than being told other things, play inspires this wit in us. And as we get into school, unfortunately, what happens is it starts to narrows, and stops that, because it puts us into a box and doesn't allow that freedom of expression. That freedom of expression allows us to be richer in the forms or studies or the directions that we want to take, because we have this buoyance, we have this allowance of freedom, we have this agility, we have this bounce back. It's all of this, which comes with us. If we don't allow the play, we are losing not only our creativeness, but also our inspiration of life. Because play is beautiful. I know myself, I don't play enough, And so when I go out into nature, that's play for me. I love it, and I just love to see the bark or the trees or the leaves or things like this. That's playful to me. And now with a phone, I can tell which plant that this is, even though I'm not a horticulturalist. But I see it's a playfulness for me, and I just feel so alive. And I feel smiles throughout my body, because there's a different air inside of it.
Wow. I can completely resonate with it, because I think I feel play is so fundamental for all of us. Without play, I think it makes us too old very soon in our lives. So I always believe we need to be that kid and always continue to have that play in us. But also, I'm going to relate this a little bit to what you have been talking. You talk about the settler, then you talk about the builder, and then the nomadic mindset. People have these kinds of attributes in them. Do you think it's kind of related to their vulnerability in some way? They don't play enough so that they feel their vulnerable side is going to be exposed, or they decide that, I'm a settler or I'm a builder, so I'm going to take the slightly more safer route and not get into that nomadic side of it to be more creative.
I think what happens is we've outsourced our lives a lot of the time. What do I mean by that? We've outsourced our lives to a job. We've outsourced ourselves out to technology. We've outsourced ourselves from actually thinking. Or memorizing. We've outsourced ourselves into playing, because now we just play on a phone or a computer. We've outsourced ourselves to not exercising enough. All of these things, which are very important, we tend to have outsourced. So you come back to the 3 mindsets. 3 mindsets, the nomad, builder, and settler, live within all of us. They have different behavioral typologies. And the settler, for example, is one that enjoys to settle. They enjoy being loyal. They enjoy having their families around them and communities and not moving very far. Many people just move down the street or next door or in with the family, and they don't want to move and they don't want to shift. And it's not just about physical, it's about the mental movement as well. So it's the mental movement. And there's often a lot of there is an aversion to risk and unknowns and unsettling and uncertainties and all sorts of things, which in actual fact are a reality. the builder loves to be very fast and to be able to manifest, to be able to take a project, take an idea and just run with it, road with it, and they will sometimes bulldoze over anyone or anywhere to get it done. And they will, but at the same time, they're the strength that are holding up the pillars of the building, so to speak. And then there's the nomad. The nomad is the one that creates that sort of building. And so they're the ones that are free and flowing, and they're very much they see a bigger picture, and they're very strategic because that's important to them. And they're creative, innovative, they find paths, agility, friendly usually. And if I put it as a house, for example, it's the architect or the people with this particular realm might be the nomads that shape that house. The ones that build the house are the builders, and they create it, and the strategy and everything. And the settlers are the ones that take care of it. All are important, and they all live within us. We have a dominance for one more than another. It may change during our lifespan. Creativity can happen in any of them and all of them. It doesn't make any difference. There is that. It's just that we have an underlying beliefs of how we can be in this world. Some of it is impacted by our external environment, family environment, cultural environment, all of these things. And the nomads are often the breakaway thinkers. They just want to break away from all of that which seems very driven in a narrow path. If I was to use my arms, the outstretched wide would be the width of the thinking pattern, generally of a nomad. A little bit closer in would be the builder, and here is the settler. But we're able to move back and forth. So in this, when we may change our mindset depending on our time. So for example, right now in COVID, I'm actually quite a strong nomad in my life. However, since this time of settling and just being in one place, my mind has been sort of settled and clouded and sometimes, and not as creative, and it became strangely comfortable. And I'm questing now for some uncomfortable time to just sort of get me out and move. And that is through my physicality for me. It's through my mind being more creative, starting to think about, well, what is that bark, so to speak. And travel would be also fantastic. However, it's not, so you have to put that up. But it's the traveling through your mind, through your body, through your heart, through your gut. That's important. I don't know if that's answered your question, but it's, I hope so, part of it.
Yes, I kind of get the part of the whole thing in terms of how the mindset works, and I can completely agree with you. Is like we all kind of have a bit of all the mindsets in us, and it keeps changing from time to time. Like I introspect. At some point of time, I'm more nomad. At some point of time, I feel a bit like a builder. You want to do something. I want to finish this project. I want to do that, and so we kind of shift between that. But my question on that, where I felt maybe if you could throw a little more light, is it like, is that being vulnerable, in this whole process? How vulnerable we feel, or how much do we expose ourselves to the other world, the world outside? Does it have an impact on our play mindset or on our creativity?
I think that the nomadic mindset is much more playful on an ongoing basis. And I want to reach out on that and stretch myself on that. I would say that generally speaking, more settled and more builder mindsets are less playful, or they don't want to reach to the playfulness as much because there is more rigidity in the way of their thinking, the way they're doing things, the way they want to be. This is the way it should be. This is that. There's a lot of shoulds in there, and where in the nomadic mindset, there's a lot of I want this to happen, I would like to have this to happen, instead of I should be like this. It's more the wanting. They want this in the wandering, the wonderment. And we've lost that as a settler a lot of the time, is that wonderment and that wandering and allowing that wandering to happen. That wandering, people used to say at school, why are you daydreaming? and you're often, why are you looking out the window? I'm just dreaming, And no, you're not allowed to dream. You have to stay focused here on the board. This is the beginning of stopping that intuition. That wandering, in actual fact, is about finding the other aspects of our being and also the creativity, allowing it to flow. If you stop the flow, imagine when you put a dam in a river. It's supposed to stop the flow and to just sort of measure it as it comes out. So you can speed it up, you can make it less. And so you have to allow the dam to flow. And then you create something from whatever comes out of that. But the mindset is free in this particular front. The playfulness needs to really come from feeling nomadic. It really does. That creativeness needs to come from that as well. And so consequently, I would say that our upbringing, our external environments, our education systems do not allow enough nomading. And I use it as a verb. I invite people to go nomading in my coaching. I invite people to go nomading when we go out into the bush. I invite people to go nomading, and what it means is wandering. In businesses, I ask people to wander your business. Wander when you can go back into the office, is to wander around it. Find out what the energy is everywhere. Find out what the people are doing. Explore, allow them to wander. Allow them to play. That's part of playing. Because you may find something that's a wonderful conversation that will spark some other idea. This is the wandering.
Oh yes, I completely agree on that fact as well, because I do believe that most of these mindsets are so averse to taking risk. The nomad is like where you want to be on the other side. You don't know what is happening. You're willing to take that uncertainty of outcome of that uncertainty, whereas they kind of have, because I don't know, nothing is certain. If you think a little philosophical, what is certain? You have this pseudo sense of certainty around you. You think the wall around me is look at the situation today that we are all in. The COVID is something that we don't see, we don't feel, but it's just around you. It's kind of locks you in that one place. And so what is certain, what is not certain is like such a myth, and we fool ourselves in terms of building concrete jungles around us to feel that we are very safe. So also, is it where we kind of limit ourselves, the kind of trust system that we kind of build in our mindset, what to trust? We have a sense of trust on certain outcomes that we have seen, vis-a-vis having no trust on something there where the outcomes are not known. So do you think being vulnerable, being exposed increases our sense of trust in life and situations and makes us more stronger and better? Or is it like going with the traditional trust system that works better?
Let me just talk about trust for one thing. When I was with the Maasai people, I asked them I would actually ask this question to all of them: how do you build trust? Because it was it's a first world challenge, right, in organizations. And they would look at me as if I was a bit stupid. Why are you asking this question? Doesn't everyone know? And so they have a very simple way of dealing with it. They say, first of all, that you need to earn the respect from others before they will trust you. So there's a respect notion here. We go all the way to trust, but we forgot that how do you build the trust? And the building of the trust comes from building the respect. And the respect between two people, a team, whichever, an individual, a culture, is, they say it's about say what you're going to say it, walk your talk, be consistent, and with your words and your actions, and that will build respect amongst the community and others, because you've said everything, you've done everything that you have said. But if you don't, and you share it with somebody else, another word, another way of saying it, or you tell somebody else and you diss somebody else, no, you won't have respect, and so therefore you won't have trust. So that is how they think of trust, and it's very simple and very, it makes common sense, because you just need to back ourselves up. But why do we trust somebody? So why do we trust also our intuition? So, we need to respect ourselves first, and respect our thoughts first. So now let's go back into the question again. So my suggestion is, and I think that with this, is that we need to, or we might want to explore during this period of time, that the virus is perhaps here as a mirror. And we need to look further than just where it is on the platter, which is really quite horrifying for some people, especially in India, and my heart goes out to everybody in India with the situation it is today. But we need to look at ourselves from this. And that's where we start to build the respect of ourselves and the trust. And to trust that this situation that we're in now is for our own good. But we need to look at it from a greater picture. Why is it good for us? Because it expands our thinking about why are we here. Because first of all, we've been fed the myth that you've talked about, that everything is certain, which is absolutely baloney, that we only deal with the known, but we only know what is in the past. We don't know what is now, we don't know what's in the future. So a variety of the things, that the unwords that people have been saying that we're afraid of, and all sorts of things, are all past. So if we continue to look to the past, we can maybe trust some of it or not trust some of it. But I wouldn't trust a lot of it at this point in time, because for me, the realization is that from COVID, there is nothing that's certain except for if you're born, then you will die, and you may have to pay taxes. That's about all that's really certain. And then from there, what is known is just simply everything that we've learned in the past and how to deal with things and our values, and those are known. But we have a chance and we have choices to see things in a different way. That's part of evolution. And I believe that's where COVID is asking us to be more involved individuals, so that we see excuse me, the planet in a much more humanistic way, and we'd care for the planet much more, because we don't have the planet, we don't have ourselves. All right? And remember that, I think we also have to remember and trust is that we are guests on this planet, and we're invited here. And so when you are a guest in someone's home, you respect that home for what it is. You respect the people that are there. So, and that will build the trust.
Wonderfully put, and I kind of resonate with the idea, like what we say in a lot of Indian philosophy also. It's like we're all like travelers, we don't bring anything to this earth. We don't take back anything from this earth, So whatever we do is in between in this journey is see how we can leave an impact back on this planet. So we were talking about a whole lot of different aspects of things. So and from your background and your thing of doing multiple things in terms of stage production to design and all of that, I'm sure collaboration has been a very, very intrinsic fact of everything, because all these large productions and creative output wouldn't have been possible without amazing collaboration. Yet, trying to bring out a vision or a product, where you have to get 50, 100 different minds to bring in one track and create a product. So how has your journey been in terms of the collaborative world, and how important you feel collaboration is the key to doing different things and more positive things to the world?
I'm really happy that you asked that question. First of all, if we break down the word collaboration, what is it? The word co means together. Lab. So what happens in a lab? There's experimentation, and there's all sorts of the play zone. This is where this all happens, the creativity in the lab. Our life is a lab, everything. And the oration is how we express it through our voices, whether it's through our bodies, through art, through design, through the camera. How is it? How is this oration? So that's the collaboration that we're doing. It might be just with one element. But for me, when I would go into a big production, I went in with some premises. First of all, I don't know everything. Secondly, I need a strong team of a variety of people in different departments that are wise, give me information, and I can believe and trust. And also in the respect, as I was speaking about. And even the individual performers was, how could I enrich their lives? How could this be an enriching space to be in? How can they grow? Because I always felt that if they don't grow, they're not going to be able to perform the vision and the mission and the purpose of this show. And they needed to come together. So we used to do a variety of practical practices. So when I would do a big creative show, or touring show, maybe I had about 40, 46 skaters. Every morning we would come together. That would be the start of our morning before we did rehearsals and started creativity. Is that I would bring together, I would tell them the quote of the day. And then I would ask them, what does it mean? Most of them wouldn't say anything. However, then I would share with them what it meant, and I would ask them then, invite them to take this along on their day, to inspire the work they do, their edges, the way they move, the way they feel, all of these things. And then we would work together. We would work together and do a class, and so everybody was moving together, feeling that movement. And because moving together is part of the inspiration. When you are moving separately, you cannot make choreography necessarily very harmonious. It's like a symphony. If you have one instrument that's out of play, it's not coming together. You need to have that as a choreography. Life is a dance, and we need to move flowing with it. Remember that in these big productions, it's about putting departments together. And I would visit every department. I would spend time with every department. I would ask them questions. I would get their thoughts on creativity. It would be a complete collaboration. And I used to say to them, when I leave the show as a choreographer and director once it's open, it is not my show, it's your show. You need to take care of it. It is your business now. It's not mine. So you need to work together. You need to collaborate on any changes and situations that happen. You need to work it together. I am not there anymore. I may be there in spirit. But the point is that I realized that the team and the collaboration between the voices was so paramount. That is what made it successful. And whenever there was problems with an individual, I would sit with them to find out what the problem was. You end up doing some sort of psychology or coaching session in that sense. However, people were there for a reason. And that's what made it successful. It wasn't about me. I felt that it was passing through me. This show was passing through. It came through my head. It would leave me, and then it would be passed on to others. And then when I left the show, I moved on to other things. But for me, that's what I say. I don't know it all. Everyone is important. We're and I often say we're as strong as the weakest link, so we must make sure that the weakest link is really strong. And, it would be pulling together from multiple layers, which they didn't really realize, which was spiritual, which was also purposeful, which was driven by a bigger picture. And they were able to understand because I was very clear. Well, I felt I was clear anyway, maybe I wasn't at times, but I was very clear in the vision, and I would bring everyone together because I wanted them to know at the very beginning and as we went along where we were going.
I get very critical, important points from that. It's about making the whole team know about the larger picture, making them connect with those important aspects of what the whole vision is all about. I remember even my early days when I used to work in ad films and stuff like that, part of the large production, the director used to make us do a lot of menial jobs, shift the pot, dust that, and used to wonder, hey, I'm like a postgraduate student, I've done my films and stuff like that, I need to be looking at the creative shot, and not really get down to cleaning a part of the floor or the sets and stuff like that. So it's like at that point of time you don't have a clarity of the vision, but then as you go a little later, then you realize, what he's doing is he's making us realize on each and every, and I feel too grateful today for things like that. Today, if I have to look at any aspect of production, right from ensuring the shot is clean, the background looks neat or something, there is no dependency, or you feel no job is big or small. You think it's all part of the production, it's all part of the team, and we are all in it together. Maybe this guy is a multi-billion-dollar star cast guy, but then it's a team. What each one takes back home may be different, but then as a unit of doing that boy who's serving the tea, if he doesn't serve the tea at the right time, you're not going to be happy and going forward. So I completely resonate with your thought of saying how collaborative worlds, and probably that's how creative worlds and creative people work together. So I'm going to ask you this. So do you believe creative people are the happy people, or they are the people who can turn this world into a happier place?
I wouldn't say all creative people are happy people. A lot of the time creativity comes out of angst, and you see a lot of that from people's lives, and artists, fine artists, and also you see it from dancers, choreographers, directors, that they had tough lives, and they show that, and it works out in their stories, right, in their dance. I think that we're there to create the opening of our minds, hearts, and souls. Creative people are there to invite you to look, whether you see it, and give you a cacophony of layers to enter, whether it just be color, whether it be music, whether it be sound, whether it be acting, whether it be clothes. They give you a place that you can enter, and then they pull it all together into one cohesive whole. However, you can, as a viewer, be happy in some parts of it, and maybe not so happy in others. They're supposed to stimulate our senses. So in that happiness and playfulness, creativity doesn't necessarily mean the person is happy or creative. They may be very deep in thought and aspects. I'm sure you have seen many people that are very deep. But I think that the majority are very happy to see what happens with the result of how people respond. And if it's happiness, if it's sadness, if it's joy, whatever it is, I think that is our main goal, is to allow all the emotions to flow. And it doesn't matter where you are inside of you. It's an exploration.
Now, I like the way you look at it and the perspective that you bring in. It brings me down to one last question, Kevin. what do you see as like a single agenda? What is that we can do? And see, there is a lot of chaos in the world today, and like even this whole situation, we don't see countries coming together, people don't coming together to solve out a crisis that is affecting humanity in grounds on a larger scale. So what do you see is as a pill, that people can take to create a happier world?
Wow, I want the blue pill, please. Interestingly enough, when I was sitting in the Sahara, I was sitting in a tent, and I had been already to Mongolia and to Kenya, and the nomadic cultures were very different religions, different food, different climates, different histories, different all sorts of things. And this one fellow, the master of the house, said to me, he said, "What makes us all similar?" He didn't say what makes us different. And I said, "It's your humanity. There is no difference necessarily in your humanity. What you're exhibiting in some of the different behaviors are all the same, just different parts of the world." So how does that bring back to where your question? And that is that I believe that very strongly that we have to understand that what we're going through is just another part of the journey of life. And we as humans are put on this earth to journey, to learn, to grow, to explore, to evolve. That's why we're here. Yes, sometimes we don't get along. Yes, sometimes we do get along. Yes, sometimes we're happy. Yes, sometimes we're not. It's all part of the journey. And going through it is what makes us stronger. Resilience comes from that bounce back factor, it's called. And if there's any cultures that are more resilient, are nomadic cultures. They've had to be. They have to be on a daily basis resilient because their survival is on the line every day. Maybe not so severe every day today, but it is there. And that resilience, because of our comfort level, has been reduced. It's a practice. COVID has shown us that we need to be resilient. We need to bounce back. And so we are having to find something in us that we're not very comfortable with, and whatever it might be. But we need to be able to allow ourselves to bounce. Creative people are constantly on the bounce back because they realize that's how they get creative. They're through that playfulness. It's through that allowing themselves to see things from very different ways. And when we get stuck into a very narrow state of mind, such as settler and sometimes builder, but mainly settler, we have this challenge of getting wide again. We may leave this session today with a quote from a young millennial student from Mongolia, and she said, "Nomads think vastly, act narrowly. Think vastly, act narrowly." And that means that they start off with the vastness. They don't start off with the narrow. COVID asked us to go wide, but most people went narrow. But it was asking us to go wide and to see why is this, what is happening. But we went narrow to try to, try to solve the problem. But I believe that we need to go wide first. If we're going to be happy, joyful, playful, creative, anything in our mindset is to go wide first. It's scary out there, but that's the playfulness.
Beautiful, beautiful. I think wide and act narrow. It's like the mantra that I'm picking up from our talk today. One thing that when you go back, it's always get your dreams and visions as large and wide as possible, and then maybe start off with smaller increments of whatever you need to focus and start working on. And I think that's where the whole magic lies for all of us. And I'm extremely grateful that you took out this time today and shared this wonderful piece of experience with all of us. And I'm sure this is going to inspire a whole lot of people who are going to be listening to this.
Well, I just invite everyone to go nomading and just explore. And as I say, to explore, to expand, to emerge, experience, and to evolve. That's what I would say. Let the nomad be released in you.
Wonderful.